Welcome friends. Now let us discuss about the amendment which is there in your TDS provisions. Friends, when you talk about your TDS provision, it is discussed in section 51, read along with your rule 66. So section 51 of your CGST Act read along with your rule 66 of CGST rules. Now basically there are two amendments when you talk about your TDS. The first one is what are the particulars of TDS certificate. So when you talk about TDS provision, GST TDS provision in terms of section 51 read along with rule 66, there is something called as TDS certificate. Now the first amendment is the particulars of TDS certificate earlier were prescribed in section, now they are taken to rules. What will be the contents of TDS certificate? What would be the contents of TDS certificate? Earlier it was given in section, now they have taken it from section 51, they have taken it to rule 66. Now the second important amendment that has come out is now the TDS certificate would be automatically given by the portal. The person who is deducting TDS need not give the TDS certificate, it will be automatically generated and given by the on the portal itself. Supposing I am the TDS deductor and you are the TDS deductee. Earlier I should have, after deducting TDS, after filing TDS return, I should give you TDS certificate. Now that requirement is gone, because automatically when I deduct TDS and file my TDS return, automatically the recipient or the deductee rather, the deductee will get the TDS certificate. So it is automated. Giving the TDS certificate to the deductee is automated. Therefore, there is no late fees for issuing such certificate. When it is automatic, I am not going to give you any certificate. When I am not going to give you any certificate, whether I am giving early or late does not comes into picture. Therefore, late fees for giving TDS certificate is no more required. So again, basically there are two amendments here. The first amendment talks about a scenario. What would be the contents of your TDS certificate? Earlier was given in your section 51. Now it is taken to rule 66. First amendment. Second, TDS certificate now will be automatically delivered by portal itself. Deductee will automatically get it. Deductor need not give any TDS certificate separately. So when it is automated, there is no question of any late fees for giving that certificate, because anyways deductor is not going to give any certificate. That is the second amendment. Now friends, let us discuss about the amendments in your refund chapter. Basically three simple amendments. We are going to discuss three amendments in your refund chapter. First is an amendment in two notifications. Second one is circular. Third one is also circular. So we are going to focus on three amendments of your refund chapter. Now first amendment is relating to imports by 100% export oriented units and imports under advance authorization. When goods are imported by 100% EOU, or when the goods are imported under advance authorization in terms of your foreign trade policy, advance authorization, you import the goods without payment of import duty. Now there was an exemption. Import is there, which means customs duty will be there. So when you talk about customs duty, there was an exemption of non-payment of exemption in relation to your IGST and compensation cess portion. Basic customs duty and all needs to be paid here. The exemption is in relation to IGST and compensation cess portion. That exemption earlier was up to 31st of March 2021. Now that is extended till 31st of March 2022. So exemption, when you talk about IGST portion and compensation cess portion, this is part of customs duty. This is part of customs duty. So when you talk about your IGST portion and compensation cess portion of customs duty, when the goods are imported by 100% EOU, or when the goods are imported under advance authorization, there is no need of paying IGST and compensation cess portion of customs duty. That exemption earlier was up to 31st of March 2021. Now that is up to 31st of March 2022. This is done by amending notification number 78/2017 customs notification and 79/2017 customs notification. So this amendment is actually there based on customs. So this is 78/2017 customs notification, because you are talking about this IGST and compensation cess is part of customs duty. So this notification is not that of GST. This is that of your customs. This is that of your customs. The notification number clearly tells that it is all talking about customs duty. IGST and compensation cess portion of customs duty is exempted when the goods are imported by EOU, or when the goods are imported under advance authorization. Now that exemption is there till 31st of March 2022. 22. This is done by amending your customs notification 78/2017 customs and 79/2017 customs for imports by EOU and imports under advance authorization respectively. So that is the first amendment. Now second amendment, friends, is very important for your practical questions, very important for your practical questions. They are talking about amendment in the formula, rather not amendment, rather clarification in how to apply your rule 89 sub rule 4 formula. Rule 89 sub rule 4, which talks about refund in case of zero rated supplies, refund in case of zero rated refund of unutilized ITC in case of zero rated supplies. When you talk about the refund of ITC, it is possible only in two cases. One, refund of ITC is possible in case of zero rated supplies. So you are talking about refund of your input tax credit, refund of your input tax credit in case of your zero rated supplies. In case of your zero rated supplies, the focus is on zero rated supplies. Now the formula goes this way: it is equal to ITC on inputs plus input services for that relevant period. ITC on inputs plus input services multiplied by the numerator. Numerator is zero rated supply of goods, value of zero rated supply of goods plus value of zero rated supply of services. Value of zero rated supply of goods plus value of zero rated supply of goods plus value of zero rated supply of services divided by adjusted total turnover. Adjusted total turnover. Now let us understand what was the issue. Value of zero rated supply of goods was amended last time, and it said that it is the actual value of zero rated supply. We are focusing only on value of zero rated supply of goods. Actual value of zero rated supply of goods or 1.5 times multiplied by value of 1.5 times multiplied by value of like domestic goods. So here they go with like domestic goods, like goods domestically supplied. I can call it as like domestic goods, like goods or similar goods which are domestically, which means which are supplied within India, domestically supplied, whichever is lower. So this was the amendment last time, which was their amendment in rule 89 sub rule 4. They wanted to put a cap. When you talk about value of zero rated supply of goods, they said that there is a practice of overvaluing the goods. They said that we will go with actual value of zero rated supply of goods, that is actual value. We'll go with the actual value which is there. We will compare this with 1.5 times of value of like goods which are supplied within India, domestically supplied, and we'll take whichever is lower. So whatever value you declare or compare it with like goods which are domestically supplied multiplied by 150% or 1.5 times, whichever is lower, we'll go with it. Now this was the amendment brought in the numerator. So this amendment was there in the numerator. Now to give you an example, supposing the actual value of the goods, supposing I take a scenario where I am talking about the actual value of zero rated supply of goods, actual value that you are declaring, value of zero rated supply of goods that you are declaring, and like goods, value of like goods domestically supplied. We'll take two cases. In the first case, the value of zero rated supply of goods that you have declared, that you have said it is this value that you have declared, supposing it is say 10 crores, and the value of like goods domestically supplied, is 7 crores. That is the first scenario. Rather, we'll take it as say we'll go with the same 7 crores. Second scenario, value of zero rated supply of goods that you have declared is 10 crores, whereas value of like goods domestically supplied is only 5 crores. In the first case, what is the value that you have to take in the numerator? What is the value that you are required to take in the numerator? This amendment. This is not the amendment, the circular that we are just discussing the background. The value that you are going to take, is 10 crores, value of the zero rated supply of goods that you have declared, or 1.5 times of 7 crores, which is your 10.5 crores. 150% of 7 crores is 10.5 crores, whichever is lower. So here you will go with 10 crores. Whichever is lowest, 10 crores compared with 1.5 times of 7 crores is 10.5 crores, which is lower, 10 crores. So in the first case, no issue. The value that you have declared is 10 crores and the value that you are going to take in numerator is 10 crores, no issue. But in the second case, the value that you have declared, value of zero rated supply of goods that you have declared is 10 crores and 1.5 times the value of like goods domestically supplied. The value of like goods domestically supplied is 7.5 crores, which means 10 crores compared with 7.5 crores. So 150% of 5 crores is 7.5 crores. Now friends, the value that you have declared is 10 crores and the value that you are going to take in numerator is 7.5 crores. The value that you have declared is 10 crores, but the value that you are going to take in the numerator is 7.5 crores. 7.5 crores. The issue was there was a doubt what you will take in the denominator. What you are going to take in denominator. Now the issue is when you talk about denominator, now this is all about clarification. When you talk about denominator, adjusted total turnover implies adjusted total turnover is including turnover in a state or union territory. Turnover in a state or union territory includes value of zero rated supply of goods. When you talk about value of zero rated supply of goods, again you have to go with the same thing. The circular tells that whatever value you have taken above, so what is the value that you have taken above? Actual value of zero rated supply of goods that you have declared, or 1.5 times of value of like goods that is domestically supplied, whichever is lower. So the understanding goes in this way. Adjusted total turnover. Your adjusted total turnover includes turnover in the state or union territory. Turnover on a state or union territory includes value of zero rated supply of goods. Now value of zero rated supply of goods which you have taken in the numerator is actual value of zero rated supply of goods which you have declared, or 1.5 times of value of the goods which is domestically supplied, whichever is lower. Now the clarification came here. The circular, CBIC circular clarified this. Whatever you are taking the numerator will come in the denominator with respect to that export portion, zero rated supply of goods portion. So here doubts were raised whether in the denominator you should go with the actual value. So doubts were raised whether in the denominator, whether you should go with 10 crores the actual value, whether you should only go with 10 crores the actual value. And the understanding was that yes, in the denominator you have, as the denominator is the formula is given only for numerator. So value of zero rate supply of goods is only there in the numerator, but if you analyze the denominator, that is adjusted total turnover, that includes turnover in a state or union territory, which in turn includes value of zero rated supply of goods, which in turn has to be understood just like the numerator. So this clarification is now given, and they said that no, whatever is the value of zero rated supply of goods that you have taken for numerator will exactly come in denominator. Denominator will have other numbers also, because it will also include local turnover, but to the extent of our discussion is only about what about value of zero rated supply of goods. So whatever value for zero rated supply of goods you take in numerator, the same value you should take in denominator, which means if in the numerator value of zero rated supply of goods is taken as 10 crores, in the denominator also it is 10 crores. If in the numerator value of zero rated supply of goods is taken as 7.5 crores, the same value you are going to take in denominator with respect to your zero rated supply of goods. Obviously other things will be there. Understand friends, when you are talking about zero rated supply of goods, they have given a special formula, actual value declared or 1.5 times of value of like goods domestically supplied. So whatever value will come, that will come as as a part of numerator, also as a part of denominator, the same value as a part of numerator, also as a part of denominator. So obviously it is going to make a change. And friends, understand that even when you talk about value of zero rated supply of services, there is a special formula which you have to apply both in numerator as well as denominator. Special formula is there, right? They go on receipt basis, which you have to apply in numerator, which you have to go in denominator as well. So this clarification, this CBSE clarification has clarified this. Though the denominator talks about adjusted total turnover, it has to be read as turnover in a state or union territory, which will include a lot of other turnovers, including zero rated supply of goods, and that value of zero rated supply of goods has to be understood just the way it was understood for the numerator portion. So with regard to value of zero rated supply of goods, which will come both in numerator and denominator, you should take the same exact value for that portion. You should take the same exact value for that particular portion. Obviously denominator will include other items also. So your denominator will not only include this 10 crores or 7.5 crores as a case maybe, it will include other values also, your domestic supplies as well. So this is the clarification. Now friends, the third clarification, CBSE clarification, is with respect to your deemed export supply, is actually with respect to your deemed export supply. In case of deemed exports, we have understood that either the supplier or the recipient both can claim the refund. So deemed export supply, as per GST laws, the first tax will be paid, but refund can be claimed either by the supplier or recipient. Now when the recipient is claiming the credit, it has to ensure that when the recipient is claiming the refund, it has to ensure that credit is not availed, plus it has to receive a declaration that supplier has not claimed the refund. See, understand that if it is deemed exports, the moment it is deemed exports, first payment of tax will be made, either the supplier or the recipient can go and take the refund, can go and claim the refund. So if it is all about your deemed exports as per GST law, what will happen is, for these deemed exports transaction, deemed exports include supplies to 100% EOU or supplies to a person who is having advance authorization or export promotion capital goods scheme, so etc, etc. These are all covered in your deemed exports. What will happen is, recipient will pay price plus GST, to the supplier. Supplier will pay GST portion to the government, and thereafter this is the first step. Now thereafter government will give the refund. So if it is a deemed export transaction, what will happen is, there is a deemed exports, recipient will pay price plus GST to the supplier, supplier will pay GST to the government. Now when refund is given, either the supplier or the recipient can go for refund. Either the supplier can go for refund or the recipient can go for refund. Either the supplier or the recipient can go for refund of GST. It is either supplier or recipient. Now when recipient is going for refund, whenever recipient is going for refund, if at all recipient is going for refund, there are conditions. One of the conditions is it should not claim ITC. It cannot take two benefits. It cannot claim ITC as well as go for refund. Second, it should ensure that it should give a declaration. It should get a declaration from supplier. That it has not claimed refund. That supplier has not claimed. Both cannot go for refund. Either or. Now these are the basic prima facie conditions. If at all you are focusing only on the recipient. If at all recipient is going for refund, it should not claim ITC, plus it should get a declaration from the supplier that supplier is not going to claim the refund. Now practically how it will work out, the circular has clarified. Practically it will work out this way. Recipient, step number 1, will claim the ITC. Though I have said it should not claim the ITC, step number it will claim ITC. Step number 2, when it is applying for refund, automatically the amount will be deducted from electronic credit ledger. Initially when it is claiming ITC, it will be added to electronic credit ledger, and when it is applying for refund, step number 1, they have said that though we want recipient not to claim ITC, but first initially please claim ITC, it will be added to electronic credit ledger. When you are applying for refund, the moment you apply for refund, that amount will be deducted from electronic credit ledger. So in net effect, if you see, ITC is not claimed. This is to ensure that cross verification is pakka. If at all recipient is not claiming ITC in the beginning itself, officer has to inquire whether it claimed ITC or not. It has to evaluate a lot of things. The best practice for satisfying condition number 1, which may make the job of proper officer very simple, is step number 1, officer telling that we are telling you not to claim the refund, but you first claim the refund. We are telling you not to claim the ITC, but first you claim the input tax credit, add it to your electronic credit ledger. It will be added to your electronic credit ledger. Then you when come for refund, when you are coming for refund, automatically that amount will be deducted from your electronic credit ledger, which in net effect means ITC is not claimed. So they are making the job of both portal, this is how portal works, and they are making the job of officer simple. Officer need not investigate whether the recipient has not claimed ITC and all. So they are telling that initially recipient, please take the credit, let it be added to electronic credit ledger. When you are applying for refund, automatically that amount will be deducted from your electronic credit ledger, which means in net effect you have not claimed ITC. We are satisfied with the first condition. Take the refund of this ITC, subject to a point that you also get a declaration from the supplier that he is not going to claim the refund. So other conditions also has to be fulfilled. So this circular has focused on the condition number 1, and this is how practically it should work. Though it tells that recipient should not claim ITC, but how it practically works is first recipient claim ITC, let it be added to your credit ledger, electronic credit ledger, then you apply for refund. The moment you apply for refund, automatically it will be deducted from your electronic credit ledger, and will be satisfied that in net effect you have not claimed any ITC. So this will make the work of assessee simple, as well as the job of proper officer very simple. That is all about this particular circular about deemed exports. These are the amendments with respect to your refund chapter. Now friends, there are certain amendments in a very important chapter called as offences and penalties. So when you see your exam paper, friends, for surely you will find a question on your offences and penalties. Students have the tendency to skip this chapter, but when you see all your past examination questions, you will be surprised to find that in all the examination questions there will be at least minimum 1 question, at times 2, but minimum 1 question relating to your offences and penalties. So this time maybe you have to be very careful about this amendment that has come. Now the first amendment, friends, has come out in your section 122, which lists out your offences. Right, so section 122 had a 3 list of offences: 122 subsection 1, 122 subsection 2, 122 subsection 3. Now one more list of offences is added, which is section 122 1A, subsection 1A. So earlier there were 3 list of offences: 122 subsection 1, 122 subsection 2, 122 subsection 3. This is the 4th type that they have added, section 122 subsection 1 capital A. Now who is the defaulter here? Here friends, defaulter can be any person. Defaulter can be any person, not necessarily taxable person or registered person. It can be any person, whether he is taxable or non-taxable, registered or unregistered, he can be any person. Now any person who, they are actually focusing on the beneficiary, any person who retains the benefit of a particular transaction and at whose instance that transaction is conducted. Basically they are talking about the beneficiary, mastermind, who actually gets the benefit out of certain specified transaction and at whose instance, at whose direction that particular transaction was conducted. Now you may ask, what transaction are they talking about? They are talking about 4 types of transaction: where a supply is made without an invoice or false or incorrect invoice, where invoice is issued without making supply, both ulta, supply without invoice, now invoice without supply, where you are talking about availing or utilizing ITC without actual receipt of goods or services. You are taking the input tax credit, you have supplied, you are taking the input tax credit, but you have not at all received the goods or services. Availing or distributing ITC by input service distributor in violation of section 20. Now they are talking about four listed transaction. 4: supply without invoice or supply with incurrent invoice, invoice without supply, availing or utilizing ITC without receipt of goods or services, availing or distributing ITC by input service distributor in violation of section 20. So they are talking about 4 listed offences done by any person. Are they talking about the person who is doing that fraud? No, they are not talking about the person who has done that. They are talking about the beneficiary, person who retains the benefit of a particular these transaction and at whose instance this transaction is conducted. So what are they trying to tell? Supposing they are talking about what 4 offences, let us analyze all 4 of them and let us see what are they talking about. The 4 offences here are supply without invoice or incurrent invoice, invoice without supply, availing or utilizing ITC without receipt of goods or services, availing or distributing ITC in contravention of section 20. Now who is doing that, undertaking the transaction? The person who is undertaking the transaction, when you talk about the first case, supply without invoice, who is doing that? Supplier. For supplier there will be penalty as per section 122 subsection 1 because he is doing that particular thing. He is supplying without invoice. He is supplying without invoice. So for supplier there will be penalty under section 122 subsection 1. But who is getting the benefit? The recipient who is getting the goods or services without invoice. Who is getting the goods or services without invoice is the beneficiary. If at all it is proved that he is a beneficiary who is getting the benefit out of the transaction and plus at whose instance this transaction was conducted. If it was recipient who said that supplier, you give me the goods or services without invoice, then this recipient is the beneficiary. This recipient is the beneficiary. And for this beneficiary, friends, this recipient is a beneficiary, and for beneficiary penalty under section 122 1A will be there. For the person who is doing the transaction, penalty under section 122 1, which is already there. Now they have introduced penalty for whom? Penalty for the person who is taking the benefit out of the transaction. So our focus is on 122 1A. Second offences, invoice without supply. Invoice without supply. Who is issuing invoice without supply? It is supplier. So if a supplier is giving invoice without supply, he will face the consequences of section 122 subsection 1, which is already there. Now when invoice is given without supply, who is getting the benefit? The recipient who is getting the benefit, who is getting the fake invoices. This is nothing but bill trading. Recipient is getting the benefit in terms of claiming input tax credit on the basis of fake invoices, bill trading. Now for the recipient, they have introduced section 122 subsection 1A where he has to pay the penalty under section 122 1A. What is the penalty, by the way, for section 122 1A? The penalty, friends, happens to be tax evaded or input tax availed or passed on. The amount equivalent to tax which has been evaded or input tax credit which has been availed or passed on. So it is the amount equivalent to the tax or ITC portion. Tax or ITC portion. In all the 4 cases, by the way, not for one case, in all the 4 cases. What is the third scenario, friends? Avails ITC without receipt of goods or services. Now who is getting the benefit of ITC? Now please understand this point very clearly. Who is getting the benefit of ITC? Recipient is getting the benefit of ITC. So he is going to get a penalty under section 122 subsection 1. Now who is the person who is getting, who is the beneficiary of this transaction? Supposing it was supplier who retains the benefit of this out of this transaction and who is at whose instance this transaction is undertaken, then supplier will be caught. But wait, supplier will be caught here only and only if he is in collusion with the recipient, if he is having some role in the fraud. Otherwise suppliers will not be caught, because understand that if recipient is taking the ITC without receipt of goods or services, supplier will not know. It is not the fault of the supplier. Now understand that when 122 1A comes into picture, the opposite party, opposite party for whom 122 1A is applied, he should be getting some benefit out of it, plus under his instance this transaction should have been conducted. If you see this third point very carefully, when a person is availing ITC without receipt of goods or services, who is the person who gets the benefit out of ITC? Recipient. So here recipient will have a normal penalty under section 122 subsection 1. But who is the opposite party? Beneficiary. Beneficiary will be the supplier, but not all the suppliers. Beneficiary will be the suppliers, but not all suppliers. Only those suppliers who are purposefully doing this transaction, who are part of this transaction. Suppliers are telling that you take the ITC without receipt of goods or services, I am helping you out. Only those suppliers will be caught here, not all suppliers. Who is colliding with the recipient or who is having collusion with the recipient, who is having understanding with the recipient. So he is forcing the recipient to take the ITC without receipt of goods or services. So here recipient will be covered under 122(1), and supplier who is asking the recipient to take the credit without receipt of goods or services, he will be covered under 122(1)(a), where the penalty will be amount of ITC which is there involved, amount of ITC involved. The last point is person who takes or distributes ITC in contravention of section 20. Now friends, who distributes ITC, who is giving that ITC extra? The person who gives the ITC in case of input service distributor is ISD. ISD will take the credit, pass on the credit, take the credit, pass on the credit. So who's doing that transaction, who's doing that particular transaction? It is input service distributor. Who is getting that benefit? Branch or the recipient of ITC branch office is getting that benefit. Now for the ISD who is giving wrong credit, penalty will be under section 122 subsection 1. For the branch office who is getting wrong credit, and if at all it was under that instance of the branch office, then branch office will have a penalty under section 122(1)(a). Friends, they are trying to tell that the person who is doing that fraud, will have penalty as per 122(1), and the person who is getting the benefit, the opposite person who is getting the benefit, they will also face penalty as per 122(1)(a). Person who is doing that thing, he will have penalty under section 122 subsection 1. Person who is getting the benefit out of it, if at all he is also part of fraud, then there will be a penalty for them under section 122(1)(a). So this is the amendment that they have brought in, 122(1)(a). Now friends, you are talking about amendment in section 132, criminal proceedings. So the previous point was amendment in section 122, which was all about what are the list of offences and penalties. Now you are talking about amendment in section 132, where you are talking about criminal proceedings. Now there are two amendments that are brought out. Two amendments which they have brought out. The first amendment is in line with your section 122. First of all, there is a list of offences where criminal proceedings can be initiated. Now, what is the wordings that they have added? Whosoever commits that particular list of offences will face the consequences of criminal proceedings, or person who causes to commit and retains the benefit out of it. Now, just in line with 122, not only a person who is committing that fraud will be facing criminal proceedings, but also the person who is asking that other person to do fraud and he is getting the benefit out of it, beneficiary, he is getting the benefit out of it, he will be also be covered by criminal proceedings. Now they want to cover the mastermind also under criminal proceedings. See, the objective of section 122(1)(a) and the amendment in 132 is the same. Not only the person who is doing fraud, but also the mastermind who is asking that person to do fraud, both should be covered. Now in that list of offences where criminal proceedings can be faced, they have added 2 points. All the list of offences remains the same with a small amendment. They have said that the person who commits those list of offences, he will face criminal proceedings, plus also a person who is causing to commit such activities and he is getting the benefit out of it, beneficiary. Not only a person who undertakes or commits that activity will be facing criminal proceedings, but also the person who is causing that other person to commit that activity and getting the benefit out of it, beneficiary, he will also be covered by criminal proceedings. Now what are the activities? The activity list is very lengthy list. That list will remain the same for both the person who is doing that particular activity or the person under whose instruction that activity was done and who is getting the benefit out of it, that is beneficiary, is also covered. So that is the first amendment. Now second amendment, that is the first amendment that you have discussed. Now friends, second amendment is certain changes in the language. Now when you talk about point number section 132(1)(e), section 132(e), it was talking about evasion of tax or fraudulently availing ITC or fraudulently obtaining refund, and where such offence is not covered under A to D. So point number E, even after E the list continues. So where there is evasion of tax or fraudulent availment of ITC or fraudulent or you are talking about fraudulent refund, and where it is not covered in point number A to D, it will be covered in point number E. But they have amended point number C. What is point number C, friends? Point number C is a person who is availing input tax credit using the invoice or bill which is referred to in point number B. What is point number B? Point number B is invoice without supply. So, a person who is taking ITC on the basis of fake invoice, bill trading, plus a person who avails ITC without any invoice. So, two categories are covered. A person who takes ITC on the basis of fake invoice, plus a person who fraudulently avails ITC without any invoice. Now, what have they done? They have, this first portion remains the same. A person who avails ITC on the basis of fake invoice is the same. What is the amendment is? A person who fraudulently avails ITC without any invoice is changing. Now, what have they done? This fraudulently availing ITC which was there in point number E now is taken to point number C. Fraudulently availing ITC is taken from point number E to point number C, but with a small change. In point number E it was fraudulently availing ITC, but in point number C now it is fraudulently availing ITC without any invoice. So, what was earlier fraudulently availing ITC now is fraudulently availing ITC without any invoice or bill. Earlier it was there covered in point number E, now it is covered in point number C. So, point number E had different points. It had talked about evasion of tax, fraudulently obtaining refund. One more point was fraudulently availing ITC, where such offence are not covered in A to D. So, this fraudulently availment of ITC is removed from point number E and it is brought to point number C. In point number C already there was a point. In point number C already there was a point. What was the point there already? In point number C already there was a point, fraudulently availing ITC on the basis of fake invoice. Availing ITC on the basis of fake invoices or bills. So, this was already there. Now, what is added is fraudulently availing ITC without invoice or bill. And in point number E already 2 points were there, evasion of tax and fraudulently obtaining refund, where such offence are not covered in point number A to D. So, this remains the same. Point number E with respect to evasion of tax or obtaining fraudulently obtaining refund, where it is not covered in A to D, is remaining the same. Also, point number C with respect to availment of ITC on the basis of fake invoice, fake billing remains the same. The change is only here. In point number E there was one more point, fraudulently availing ITC, which is now removed, and it is added in point number C, where you are talking about fraudulently availing ITC without invoice or bill. So, final conclusion is in point number C you have 2 points, availing ITC on the basis of fake invoice or bill, or fraudulently availing ITC without invoice or bill. You have 2 points, availing ITC on the basis of fake invoice or bill, or fraudulently availing ITC without invoice or bill. And in point number E now there are 2 points only. Third point is now taken off, evasion of tax and fraudulently obtained refund, which is not covered in A to D. Now, this is the second amendment that we have discussed. Friends, that is all about the amendment in your offences and penalties. We have discussed the amendment both in your section 122 as well as the amendment which is there in your section 130.